Hi there, my name is Adrienne. Please feel free to call me Andy. I'm one of the fitness and sports instructors at CFB Edmonton, and in this video we're going to go through some core training for swimmers. Now, before we even get started here, what I want to kind of touch on or go over is the why. Why are we doing this? Why are we devoting an entire video here to core stabilization practices for swimmers? Well, the rationale behind this is the stronger your core is, the more engaged your core is, the more it's going to help to stabilize your movement as you're swimming, and the more efficient and powerful your movements are going to be as you're making your way through the water. So, quick test that you can do pretty much anywhere that you are. If you have some floor or wall around you, maybe a table to press down on, pick an arm, any arm. Find that object. I'm going to use the wall behind me here. Put the other hand maybe on your core if that helps for a little bit of tactile feedback. But press against the wall, press against the table, press against the floor, whatever you have there, really lightly. Okay, now try to press a little bit harder without engaging your core. See if you can feel that with the other hand. Might get a little bit more pressure, but not a lot. Press a little bit harder. Cool. Notice that core engage a little bit more. Trunk's a little bit more active. Maybe you're pushing off to one side a bit more. You're feeling your body start to stabilize a bit more. More muscles all over your body are all of a sudden going to be joining in, helping stabilize, things like that. So essentially the point I want to get with, as far as that goes, is to have that greater force production, especially with our limbs, something a little bit more distal from our trunk, a little bit farther away from this nice solid core pillar that we're working with, the more core engagement that we need to work into that. If you tried to do a big pull through the water without engaging your core at all, or with minimal core support, you're not going to get a lot out of it. That arm's going to kind of drift through the water. But if we want to get those nice, big, strong, powerful pulls that are going to get us A to B nice and quick, or really solid kicks as we're going along, we're going to need that core stability, that core engagement. Let's do a quick comparison of the following two video clips. This is an example of front crawl without any core engagement. Just take a note of what happens here. So you can see there's a little bit of an S pattern as I move through the water there. My legs are dragging behind me a little bit more, hips are swaying a bit more side to side. So my momentum isn't as straightforward. It's not going to be as efficient, not going to be quite as streamlined or as powerful moving through the water that way. All right, let's take a look at the second clip. In this one, you see I'm a lot more streamlined. I'm heading straight forward with that core engagement. It's a little bit more helpful for my kick delivery, as well as that really solid pull down through the water and past my hip. So some warm-up exercises I would love to go over, opening up through our back, opening up through our chest and shoulders a little bit, and we'll go from there. So find your tabletop position. Moving with the breath is going to be ideal here. So you can find those active hands once more, tops of feet pressing into the mat. With an inhale, we're going to lift through the head, lift through the chest and hips. As you exhale, press through the hands, press through the knees, tucking the chin. Inhale opens us up, head, chest, and hips. Exhaling, we press and round. Find a few more of these just at your own pace. No rush. Thinking about keeping a nice long spine the whole way through. Great. Once you are done with these, let's go ahead and open up our T-spine a little bit more, or our mid-back. You can find your way to forearms. We're still going to work with the breath a bit here. You're going to start by bringing right fingertips to the right side of the head, right ear. Using that inhale, start to open up through that elbow, really good rotation. Exhaling, we find your way back through neutral. Inhale, open up, maybe to the side, maybe towards the ceiling. Exhaling, bring it down. Find one more, just like that. Good to go ahead and switch sides. Exact same thing over here. Keep the hands nice and light. Let the breath help you out a little bit here. As we inhale, we're creating a little bit of space, opening up. Exhaling, we find our way back down. Two more. Awesome stuff. Find yourself a wall for this next part. You can stand against it or keep a little bit of a bend in the knee as you do so. We're going to bring our shoulders to touch, backs of our hips to touch, and as much of the back as naturally rests against the wall. From here, arms can open up to the sides, finding almost like a cactus type stance. Elbows are going to come back towards the wall, backs of hands as well. Back of the head can rest. We have all these great points of contact, and we're going to try to keep those for as long as we can moving through our slides here. So we're going to start by sliding our arms up towards the ceiling. See how high we can get them without letting our back either start to really arch off the wall and compensate, or without lifting our hands or elbows away, depending on where your mobility is. On your way back down, think about shoulders down away from the ears, nice long spine. Slide those elbows down towards the ribs again. See if we can keep elbows in the backs of the hands. We'll just go through a few more of these. This will warm up a little bit through your upper body. It's a great active range of motion exercise through the shoulders, arms. You might notice that one of your arms is completely different than the other. That's a very normal thing to see a little bit of imbalance in the body. All right, let's talk about shoulder positioning a little bit while we are swimming or moving through the water. In the upper body in general, the more relaxed we can keep it, the more ideal it's going to be. So when we're going, you want to think about keeping that nice long spine. Shoulders are still a little bit active, but they're pulling back and down. What I mean by this is as we're swimming, even though we're letting our arm come up and over, we're not letting that shoulder sneak up towards the ear or letting the back round so much. Still going to keep a little bit more openness in the chest, drawing back and down with those shoulder blades. Like I said, everything through our trunk, still part of our core. So our abdominals that we're familiar with, obliques, glutes, any of the supporting structure around and down our back as well. So that is our core activation here. We used a little bit of it in our bird dogs. We're just going to keep that in mind as we move through the rest of our exercises today in that scap set position. Our scapulae or our shoulder blades are set in a good spot on our back. They are sitting comfortably, pulled back and down. You can think about it like you're trying to put your shoulder blades in your back pockets. without adding an arch in the back, right? Spine stays neutral. You can think about this like we're putting our shoulder blades down into our back pockets or squeezing them back together a little bit, as long as you're finding a fairly neutral stance. Okay, before we get started on these exercises here, I want to just touch on a couple of things. Active hand positioning and active foot positioning, which I would like to involve as much as possible today. The more we can get a really solid grip with our hands, get really active with our feet as we make our way through these core exercises, the more stable we are going to feel. It's going to get our body working together a little bit more effectively, and overall, that balance, that coordination might be a little bit easier. So what I mean when I say that, for hand positioning first, if you come into a tabletop position, hands stacking over shoulders, hips stacking over knees, spread your fingers out nice and wide. Excellent. From here, we're going to press down through all of the fingertips, through the thumb, heel of the hand, and you can almost think about it as though you were trying to either draw water through the floor, whatever floor you're working with, out of the ground into your hand, or if that visualization doesn't really help, as though you were almost going to bring your hand into a fist without actually moving your hands off the ground. So relaxed hands, super, super light on the ground here, super easy, or active hands, firmly pressing down, and immediately you might feel a bit of core engagement already just with that activity going on. As far as foot positioning goes, what I want you to think about here is feet well planted. You should be able to feel your heels, feel the balls of your feet and toes all pressing into the ground. If you want to isolate a little bit more, you can think about all four corners of that foot, that big toe, pinky toe, both sides of your heel, finding your way down into the floor here, or even more of a triangle shape, if that makes a little bit more sense. Same thing with the feet. They're really nice and active. You can think about it like that same thing, drawing up through the water or lifting up through the arches as we are here. That's going to help with just a little bit more stability as we make our way through these exercises. First exercise we'll go over here is a bird dog. This one I want you to think about keeping that core nice and strong, long neutral spine, and rather than reaching up, reaching for opposite walls. We're going to work to find a lot of length here as we move through this exercise. So set up in that same tabletop, find your active hands, make sure you're nice and stacked, and find that long spine. Sometimes we tend to drop the head a little bit, tuck the chin back slightly, draw forward through the crown of the head, back through your tailbone. Let's start right arm, left leg. We're going to send it forward and back, really big reach. Now option one, keep that back foot on the ground. Option two, coming up a little bit higher, but notice that I'm not reaching straight up, not arching through the back there, just finding that nice solid line through our spine, active through the fingertips, reaching them forward. Thumb comes up towards the ceiling. Maybe bicep comes along the ear, depending on where your shoulder mobility is. And then get active through the leg too, so glute is engaged to help stabilize. We're flexing the toes back towards the face. Holding that steady there. Same thing on our second side. Let's go ahead and even that out. Left fingertips forward, right leg coming back. And a quick reminder, if you have hyperextended elbows like I do, or if they happen to be a little bit more mobile, keep a soft bend in the elbow just to help protect it a little bit more. I want to think about drawing that core in towards the spine. Staying nice and long here, nice and neutral. And finding our way back down. To get that initial activation, go for a 5 to 10 second hold on each side. Make sure you are breathing really solid, full breaths. And then we'll go through a few more reps once we get into the actual workout. Next exercise I want to go over are your prone Superman lifts. These we're going to be working a little bit across the body, similar to our bird dogs. Opposite arm and leg are going to be lifting together, and the reasoning for that is when I'm thinking swimming, most often it's going to be something like front crawl or back crawl. One side is moving at a time for your pulse. Of course, breaststroke is going to be a little bit different. Everything's moving together. However, I would like to aim this more at that alternating pattern, right, left, because it is harder to stabilize than if the body is moving together. Okay, so for this one, you're going to be on your stomach with your feet, toes untucked. So tops of feet are pressing into the mat, laces down. If you have shoes, I would recommend taking them off for this part, just so you can get a little bit more mobility through the tops of the ankles. If that is restricted by your footwear, of course. Arms are going to come out overhead. Shoulder width is preferable. If you have a little bit more limited shoulder mobility, widen your stance a little bit. Otherwise, shoulder width is fine and dandy, and we'll go thumbs up. Forehead can come to rest on the ground or stay at a neutral spine. Raise it slightly. And as we lift with this one, we're going to go opposite arm, opposite leg. So like I said, right arm, left leg, same as our bird dogs that first round. Going to lift up. Should feel some activation through your back, through your left glute. Press down a little bit through the front of whatever the rest of your body is touching the ground here. Go ahead and release that down. Try it out on your second side. Left arm, right leg. Actively pressing down a little bit with the opposite arm, opposite leg. Cool. As you're doing these, keep in mind you want to keep that gaze low, maybe slightly ahead of where it would be if your head was on the ground, but not looking straight forward, just so we're a little bit kinder to our spine here. Next up, we're going to find our way into some scissor kicks. Option to do these with bent knees instead. I'll demo both and we'll go from there. You're going to find your way onto your back and get really, really active. We talked about active through the hands, active through the feet. I want you to get active through your back now. So shoulder blades are going to find their way down into the mat. Should be able to feel the back of both hips down into the mat as well. Hands can press down at your sides if you want a little bit more of a challenge. Arms are welcome to come up beside the head, not holding on to the neck or anything like that, but keeping them raised is going to challenge the stability a little bit more. Core is nice and strong here, so we can think about pressing the back down in towards the mat. We're not rounding the spine fully off of it, but keeping it firm, pressing towards shoulder blades, backs of the hips, and arms all pressing down. We're going to bring one leg straight up, other one to a hover. Active with the legs here, toes flexed back towards your face. Feeling a little bit more core activation as we find our way into our first stance. And then with control, we're going to go ahead and switch sides. As you do these, at no point do I want you to full kick, really big rush. Keep them really, really slow, really controlled. And at any point, if you start to feel your low back lifting up, or you feel any discomfort here, let's modify a little bit. So maybe we don't go quite as far down. Have that higher angle of the leg compared to the hover, or we can bend through that top knee, almost like more of a bicycle. So one knee draws in towards the chest as the other leg extends. Great. Next up is our glute bridge. We'll go through a double leg and a single leg. We're going to keep that same back activation to start. Shoulder blades pressing down. Hips are just grounded for now, but they will be lifting, so don't worry too much about keeping them firm into the floor. But we're going to come back to that foot activation here. Spread out your toes nice and wide. Feet are about hip distance. And you can think about it as heels are close enough that you could just about touch your heels if you're reaching down for them. Arms can plant at either side. Get strong through your core. Engage the glutes. Squeeze, 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 squeeze. Press through the heels. And go ahead and lift. We're going to hold for a couple of breaths here. Knees should stay about hip distance. We don't want them collapsing in or falling out. Core stays nice and strong. Glutes are part of your core too, part of that bigger trunk area. So let's keep them fired up. And go ahead and lower with control. Let that relax for a moment. Cool. As an option as you go through your workout, you can go through these double leg or single leg glute bridges. If you're going for a single leg today, I'm going to recommend just extending one leg straight out. Put your focus on keeping your hips level. Core stays nice and strong to stabilize as we press through the heel, lifting up. What I mean with those level hips is we don't want that hip to drop down. We don't want any twisting through our torso that doesn't need to be there. Same thing on the second side. Awesome. All right, next up we're going through a side plank. Now for this one, I'll offer a ton of different options for your hold. Biggest thing I want you to keep in mind, nice long neutral spine, stack your joints, and breathe, please. It's gonna make this whole thing a lot easier. When you're starting off with your plank today, feel free to go from the hand or from the forearm. I'm going to demo mostly from the forearm today. As far as your legs, option 1 is going to be nice long line here, but with the bottom knee dropped. You can see my shoulder is stacked over top of my forearm, over top of my straight arm if I was planting with the hand instead. Level up from the knee, a little bit more intensity, staggered feet. Larger base of support, a little bit easier to balance. If you stack the feet, a little bit harder still. We'll add a couple more just for fun. Maybe we lift that top leg just a little bit. You can add a bend to the knee and draw it forward, controlling against the rotation that wants to happen. Or another option, if lifting that knee up with the bent leg is already going to be pretty challenging, but you're still craving a bit more intensity, a little bit more challenge, go ahead and extend that leg away from you a little bit more. Exact same thing if you're starting on the other side, same thing if you're starting from the hand. Just again, stack your joints, core stays really strong, super stable, engage your glutes. They're part of your core, don't forget about them. And think about pressing the hips a little bit forward and up. Those are really gonna help out in your side plank. Coming back to some more single leg stability, we'll go over a single leg deadlift. Now we're gonna do this one body weight. As we're going, active feet, whichever one is your standing leg, keep it active. I'm gonna start over on my left foot, keeping my spine up nice and tall, sending my right leg back. Right hand is going to reach down towards the left shin, maybe left foot. If I have a water bottle on the ground, I can use that. And I'm aiming to keep my spine nice and long as I do so. Rather than rounding through the back, really, really long and tall, like you have a string pulling up out of the top of your head through this whole movement. Setting up nice and tall here, you can send that leg back, active through your opposite foot, long spine. You can think about a long line from the crown of your head, out your back heel, hinging at the hips to our single leg deadlift. If you want to add that reach, opposite arm is coming across towards the ground, coming back up with control. Feel that big toe, pinky toe, heel, all pressing in really firm to bring you back up to stand. Exact same thing on your second side. Of course, we have to even everything out here. So find that neutral spine, that really good active foot. And if it doesn't feel good, to go for that opposite arm reach, option to keep the hands on the hips. All right, bringing it onto the ground for one more here. A couple of options for a core exercise. Option number 1 is going to be bicycles. So this one, you can bring hands up to either side of the head, fingers just nice and light, not putting a ton of pressure there. We're going to draw one knee in towards the chest as we lift and rotate, elbow towards that knee. Doesn't have to touch, it's just coming towards it. Come on back through center, alternating sides here. Finding that cross-body activation through our abdominals. Fingers nice and light again here. Aiming to lift one shoulder blade or the other as we come up for that bicycle. Another alternative, maybe a little bit more intense. So again, if this is uncomfortable for the low back at all, try out the bicycles or maybe take a rest for this exercise. All right, so hands on either side on the ground again. Back is super active, shoulder blades down, backs of hips down, core strong, pressing our back into the ground, into the mat. We're gonna extend the legs out and just perform small, small kicks here. The lower you go, the harder this one is going to be. So 45-degree angle is going to be a little bit easier, right above the floor, a little bit more challenging. I encourage you to go at a spot that you are still able to take full breaths. And if you find you're holding your breath at any point, maybe we adjust a little bit more or reset in our back to see if we can get that same level of intensity from the exercise without compromising our breath. All right, so one of my most favorite parts of swimming is the streamline. Super efficient way of moving through the water, really effective. Basically that nice, strong rocket ship shape as you're pushing off the wall or moving into any kind of a longer glide. What this often looks like, especially for me and my coaching background, has always been hands stacked, arms up, squeezing your biceps to your ears if your shoulders allow it, little bit of a chin tuck, and keeping that core nice and strong. This to me looks like a hollow body hold, so let's get over that. From your back, you want to think about creating a hollow body or kind of a boat shape, really shallow boat, maybe a canoe, or you can think about it like a banana shape as well, if that helps. You want to think about squeezing everything in towards your center, in towards your midline. So if those arms are up overhead, like I mentioned, hands stacked, squeezing biceps in towards our ears. With our legs, we're thinking about squeezing them together, keeping that nice long line. You can already see, maybe, my back is starting to arch a little bit here, so I want to avoid that before I lift my legs. I'm going to think about really, really strong through the core here, pressing my back firm into the mat. Legs can come up to whatever angle feels okay for me. Lifting slightly through the head, maybe lighter through our shoulder blades. Finding that nice, strong streamline. Get to hang out there, challenge yourself, see how that feels. Take some breaths. If we want to make this a little bit more dynamic and bring it into some hollow body rocks, there's a couple different options. If that full hollow body hold is really challenging, my recommendation for the rocks would be to make your shape a little bit shorter by bringing your arms down by your sides. Now a rock is complete when your shoulder blades and your heels have tapped on either side of the movement. So you can think about it with that core strong. We're rounding ourselves out a little bit so we can rock. Tap the heels, tap the shoulders. Heels, shoulders. Same goes if we have the arms up overhead, tapping the heels, tapping the shoulder blades. Remember to breathe. The arms are coming up. Go ahead and squeeze. Find that nice round shape. Shoulders and heels tapping for each rock. Our goal with these is to make them as smooth and fluid as possible. At any point, if you really feel like you're like slapping the ground with your shoulder blades or with your heels, see if there's a spot that you can round out or maybe engage a little bit more to help smooth out that movement. All right, so now we've gone over some core exercises that we can do dry land, but I think it's about time we get in the water as well. If you are in and swimming and you still want to get that core fired up, focus on it a little bit more. Here are some of my favorite drills to do just that. First off, let's talk about pull. Pull is an arms-only drill. Usually I'm going to recommend using this one for front crawl. What you'll need is a pull buoy, something like this, and that will be held between your legs while you do your front crawl back and forth across the pool. When you're doing this one, you'll notice a really, really big difference if the core is held or if it's starting to let go a little bit, whether that's, again, more in the abdominals, through the obliques, or around into your back. You'll notice a little bit more of that S pattern, similar to the videos we looked at earlier, as well as just a little bit of a less efficient pull. If you've never tried pull before, I would recommend doing a few laps, seeing how it feels, and trying it with the core engaged and with the core totally relaxed, and see what feels better, see what feels more powerful as you're moving through the water. Next up, single arm front crawl. This one I'm going to recommend using a flutter board. If you're comfortable without a flutter board, you can certainly do a catch-up drill instead, but for today's purposes, we're just going to go over it with the flutter board. All this is both hands holding on to your board. When you do those front crawl pulls, you get a nice big powerful pull back past the hip. Nice easy arm recovery up and over. You can continue with the same arm over and over as you make your way across the pool. Come back with the opposite arm as you return. When you're doing these ones, you want to emphasize that core engagement, really good bracing, so that your pulls are really powerful and you can get that pull past the hip every time. Make it really strong, really powerful. And you should feel all of your momentum bringing you straight forward. This is a nice way to see if you're getting still a little bit of that S pattern, whether it's from your pull or from your body positioning, if you start to curve at all as you're going, since you're paddling with the same arm over and over. Even though we're only using one arm, we still want to bring everything straight forward. Great, next up we have a dolphin kick. This one is a really excellent start to any of your laps. If you're pushing off the wall into a streamlined position, following it with a couple of dolphin kicks, and then moving into a front crawl or a back crawl stroke. When you're doing your dolphin kick, legs are together, core is really strong, and a lot of the power is driving down from that core into the legs to get a really good flick out through the feet. When you're doing this one, knees and ankles relaxed. Like I said, legs together. We're going to take a quick look at it here again in a sec. But a couple of options, just take a note. You can do this at the surface with a flutter board, like we just had for single arm pulls, or you can go underwater, really your choice. But again, focusing on that really big movement, starting from the trunk, starting from that core. Alright, next one here is flutter kick, and again we're going to use the flutter board. You can go with or without, but a couple of different options holding onto that board. You can either do a bit of a sandwich grip right on the very end, arms extended, shoulders relaxed, or both arms grabbing over top of the board, again just relaxing through the shoulders, relaxing through the upper body to try and maintain that nice straight streamlined position as you're making your way through the water. Your flutter kick is your classic just alternating kicks. Again, knees and ankles are relaxed, but same as your dolphin kick. We want to use that core a little bit more, get the abdominals engaged, everything in and around our trunk to get a really powerful kick every time. One more exercise that you can get into in some deeper water or shallower, if that's more comfortable for you, is going to be a little bit of sculling in a boat pose. Boat pose is already a little bit challenging to hold on land, but transferring it to the water just makes things a little bit more interesting as well, and more applicable to our strokes and swims. You're going to do this by keeping that spine up nice and tall again, finding a little bit of a lean back and drawing knees up towards your chest. Feet can stay under the water, or maybe they start to peek out a little bit. The more your legs tend to straighten in this one, or the more that you allow your legs to straighten, the harder this one is going to be. So if you need an easier variation, go ahead and bend those knees, keep the feet just under the water. When you're sculling here, I'll show you the video in just a sec, we can move forwards or backwards. As you're moving forwards, I'll encourage you to keep those shoulders back and down as you're sculling with hands out to either side to bring you forward across the pool. And again, when you're going backwards, shoulders stay back and down, a little bit easier too in this position specifically, waving that water away from you, nice and relaxed through the hands, but core super strong to help support that position as we're making our way across. Last but not least, we're going to get into some egg beater. This one definitely is going to use a lot of your core as well, especially if you're more limited to internal and external rotation at the hip. In the deep end, somewhere that you can't touch the bottom is going to be optimal space for this. We'll take a look at a video in just a sec here, but a couple things I just want to note. That back is staying up fairly nice and tall. You want to have your airway clear, ideally whole head out of the water as you're going, and just nice big sculling arms to help support you. Legs are going to be up, knees up, almost like you're sitting in a chair. Just giving yourself a really nice wide stance. You have room for legs to make alternating circles here. As you do your egg beater, toes are flexed back towards your face. Core is engaged, both through the front, back, sides, everything there. And again, like I mentioned, that limited hip mobility, where that's going to come into play is if the hips are limited to making a nice big circle for your egg beater, we can adjust a little bit and adapt a little bit by finding a bit of lateral flexion and using those obliques to help get a larger and more powerful movement as we go. At the end of the day, the point that I really want to hammer home here is if you think when you're swimming you don't need your core, you're not using your core very much, definitely think again. Obviously, we get a lot more power from our pulls as we're moving through the water. We can be way more efficient with our movement, and ideally that's really what our swimming is about. When we're moving through the water, we want it to be as efficient as possible, whether we're going for speed, for power, for endurance. Efficiency is key, and that strong pillar, that strong, stable trunk is what's really going to help us to achieve that along with the rest of our technique. If you want a way to up your game a little bit more, come back to these dryland exercises and see how they affect your strokes. Thanks so much for watching today. I'm really happy to be here presenting this information. Again, if you missed it at the start, my name is Adrienne, but feel free to call me Andy. I'm one of the fitness and sports instructors here at CFB Edmonton. And so if you had any other questions or you're really interested in the information we presented today, reach out. Definitely swing by the office if you get the chance or you're in the area. Otherwise, I would highly recommend reaching out to your friendly neighborhood PSP staff. Thanks.